Ever wondered how the food travels inside our body and how it comes out as poop? Well, yeah. I know it's common knowledge that the digestive system does that. We're not toddlers anymore to not know that. I'm pretty sure that you do know too. But do you know the details about this system? Well, if you don't, come, let me talk about it. The digestive system is responsible for the digestion of food that we eat and the absorption of the nutrients and energy from these foods. It is also known to be the most complicated and diverse organ system in our body because it includes a lot of organs with a lot of specific tasks all at the same time. This system involves mechanical digestion, which is the breaking down of foods physically into smaller pieces, and the chemical digestion, which is the breaking down of foods into simpler nutrients using enzymes for it to be used by the body. And now, moving on to the actual process of digestion. The whole passage along which food passes through our body is called the alimentary canal or the gastrointestinal tract. We also have the accessory digestive organs, which are the teeth, tongue, salivary glands, liver, pancreas, and gallbladder. The food enters our body through our mouth, then to the esophagus, where it will be pushed down towards our stomach, where the food is further broken down. Afterwards, it is pushed towards the small intestine, where the energy and nutrients from the food that we ate is being absorbed. Then the leftover materials and dead cells pass through the large intestine, where the remaining fluids are being drained out. Afterwards, the food reaches a pouch-like organ, which we call as rectum. The nurse in this organ senses its expansion, which triggers our urge to defecate. And as we defecate, the food that we ate, which has now turned into poop, will exit our body through the anus. The alimentary canal has two kinds of epithelium. First is the stratified squamous epithelium, which covers the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, and the intestines. This allows the food to move around without damaging these organs. Next is the simple columnar epithelium, which covers the stomach and intestines. This epithelium allows the exchange of materials like the absorption of nutrients and the secretion of enzymes. Digging deeper, this system has 6 major steps, namely ingestion, propulsion, mechanical breakdown, chemical digestion, absorption, and defecation. First is the ingestion. The parts involved in this step is the mouth. In the mouth, we begin eating by introducing the food. The disassembly begins as we chew on our food. The teeth performs the mechanical digestion by grinding the food, and our saliva performs the chemical digestion, where the enzyme amylase breaks down the starch from the food. The food will then become a moist lump, which we call as bolus. Next is the propulsion. The part involved here is the esophagus. From our mouth, we swallow our food towards our esophagus, where the peristalsis will occur. Peristalsis is an involuntary movement of the esophagus, which is a series of muscular contractions which propel our food towards our stomach and intestines. Third is the mechanical breakdown. The organ involved here is the stomach. In the stomach, the muscular stomach walls grind the food, break down the food into smaller chunks to increase the surface area for the absorption. Next is the chemical digestion. The parts involved here is the stomach, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and small intestine. Still in the stomach, the chemical digestion happens when the lining secretes hormones that trigger the release of acids and gastric juices to dissolve the food. The stomach has 4 layers, namely mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. The innermost layer is the mucosa, which is composed of connective tissues. The inner mucosa is composed of mucous cells, which are used in lubricating the stomach and in protecting it from digesting itself. Next is the submucosa layer, which promotes the elasticity of the stomach. The muscularis externa includes an extra layer of smooth muscles to give the stomach extra strength. And lastly is the serosa, which covers the organs and lines the body wall. The mucosa has gastric pits which connects to tubular gastric glands which contain secretory cells. These glands secrete different substances used for digestion. First is the hydrochloric acid or the HCl, which is produced by the parietal cell. This substance nature or change the shape of proteins to make it easier to digest. Next is the pepsinogen, which is an enzyme produced by the chief cells. This combines with the HCl to form the protein digesting enzyme called pepsin. Together, they can kill bacteria and viruses. Regulatory hormones are produced by the enteroendocrine cells. Serotonin and histamine hormones are produced to trigger other cells to release more acid or to contract muscle tissue. On the other hand, somatostatin is used to tamp the action down and to inhibit the secretions. And lastly is the gastrin, which is produced by the G cells. This hormone stimulates gastric activity. The stomach also has 3 phases of regulation. First is the cephalic phase, which occurs in our brain. This happens when we sense the food by smelling, seeing, tasting, and even thinking about the food. This sensory input is then relayed to the hypothalamus, then to the medulla oblongata, which will then tap the parasympathetic fibers of the vagus nerve, which will be the one to inform the stomach to prepare for eating. However, this is only a conditioned reflex, which means that it only works if you want to eat the food. Next is the gastric phase, which happens in our stomach. This is jump-started by both neural and hormonal mechanisms as food enters our stomach. The stretch receptors in our stomach will be activated, which will then stimulate the stomach to turn up the juices. As acids neutralize, the alkalinity rises, which then result to the secretion of gastrin. When the stomach acidity increases, the release of gastrin is inhibited. And lastly is the intestinal phase, which happens in the small intestine. This is a phase when the rate of which the stomach empties is being sped up or slowed down based on the situations or the needs of the body. After passing through the stomach, the bolus now becomes chyme. Moving on to the next part involved, the hormones from the stomach alerts the liver, pancreas, and gallbladder to produce and secrete enzymes and digestive juices and transfer bile to the alimentary canal. These enzymes break down the nutrients into their most basic building blocks. Next is the small intestine, specifically the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. The liver sends bile to the gallbladder and secretes it to the duodenum to dissolve the fats for it to be easily digested by the pancreatic and intestinal juices. Enzymes break down the lipids into fatty acids and glycerol, the proteins to amino acids, and carbohydrates to glucose. The second and the last part of the small intestine, the jejunum and ilium, is where the absorption happens. The absorption is done by the microvilli and villi, which coats the jejunum and ilium. These allow a greater surface area for the absorption of the molecules and its transference to the blood to feed the body. And lastly is the defecation. The parts involved here is the large intestine, rectum, and the anus. After the absorption of nutrients, the indigestible leftover fibers, water, and dead cells pass through the large intestine. The intestinal wall drains out the remaining fluids, thus forming the stool, or the poop. The stool will then reach the rectum, which is a pouch-like organ at the end of the large intestine. During defecation, the food exits the body through the anus. And that marks the end of the digestive process. But before I end this video, I would like to give you a fun fact. Some animals out there, like dogs, eat their own poop. The scientific term for this behavior is called coprophagia. Well, I hope you don't do this behavior too. So that's all. Bye!